Well, amid the latest looming tariff threat from the U.S. president, Premier Wab Kinew struck a defiant tone at the First Minister's meeting in PEI this morning.
It's clear that the booze bans are having an impact. And as we negotiate and try to remind Americans that the cost of living is more expensive because of Donald Trump, because of his tariffs and because of his war in Iran, we're going to continue using those tools that give us leverage. And the booze bans are one of those tools.
Canada just made a move that is hitting the United States where it hurts the most. American alcohol is still locked out, businesses are losing money, and even U.S. leaders are starting to panic. While Canada stands strong, the U.S. is facing losses that are getting harder to ignore. Canada's premiers gathered in Charlottetown and made a decision that American alcohol producers have been dreading for more than a year. The provincial bans on U.S. beer, wine, and spirits stay in place. Not one province offered to lift them. And with a U.S. senator now publicly appealing to Washington's trade czar over collapsing tourism revenue, the pressure Canada's liquor boards are applying has become the most measurable economic weapon in the entire trade conflict. The mechanism that makes provincial alcohol restrictions so commercially effective is structural rather than political. Canadian provinces operate government-controlled liquor distribution systems. The LCBO in Ontario, the Société des Alcools du Québec, BC liquor stores, and their equivalents across most of the country function as monopoly importers and retailers. When a provincial government directs its liquor board to stop purchasing American products, there is no private sector alternative through which those products can reach Canadian consumers. The removal is total, immediate, and requires no legislation, no international negotiation, and no federal approval. The scale of what those boards removed is documented. The LCBO cleared more than 3,600 American products from its inventory when Ontario's restrictions took effect, representing approximately $965 million in annual sales of American wine, beer, spirits, and seltzers. That removal extended beyond retail shelves into the wholesale channel, meaning no restaurant, bar, or licensed establishment in Ontario could source American alcohol through any legal supplier. Other provinces implemented parallel measures. Quebec, British Columbia, Manitoba, Atlantic Canada, and the territories all restricted American alcohol purchases through their respective provincial boards. The commercial damage to American producers is measured in export data. U.S. wine exports to Canada fell 78% between 2024 and 2025, according to Wine Institute figures. Sales of American spirits in Canada dropped 66.3% in the roughly 8 weeks following the initial provincial announcements, according to analysis by Spirits Canada. Brown-Forman, the Louisville, Kentucky company that produces Jack Daniels, characterized the shelf removals publicly. CEO Lawson Whiting stated, "That is worse than a tariff, because it is literally taking your sales away and completely removing our products from the shelves." The Charlottetown Premier's meeting confirmed that coordination on these measures will continue. Premiers emphasized that any future measures will be coordinated across provinces and focused on defending Canadian workers and industries if additional American tariffs are imposed. Ontario Premier Doug Ford stated directly that Ontario will not lift its ban. We can't keep rolling over. That collective provincial position removed a potential concession from the negotiating table before the federal government's intensified talks with Washington began. The domestic Canadian commercial consequence of the restrictions runs in the opposite direction from the American losses. Ontario VQA wine sales jumped 58% in the year following the ban. Overall sales of provincially produced alcohol in Ontario rose 20%. Quebec's domestic wine industry has reported growing sales even as total provincial alcohol consumption declined, meaning Canadian producers are capturing an expanding share of a contracting market, which reflects genuine consumer preference shift rather than passive substitution. Maverick Distillery in Oakville, Ontario reported vodka sales up 100% at the LCBO and whiskey sales up 300%, with CEO Craig Peters confirming the company is preparing to move to a larger facility. The American political response to the cumulative pressure has now reached the Senate. CTV News reported that a U.S. senator issued a blunt appeal to the American trade representative to improve relations with Canada, citing collapsing tourism revenue in American communities that depend on Canadian visitors. That appeal reflects a documented commercial reality. Canadian air travel returns from the United States fell 28%. Air Canada has cut more than 3,400 scheduled flights to American destinations across 2026. WestJet has stated it sees no indication the transborder demand decline will reverse, and Air Transat canceled its entire American route network. Hotels, restaurants, and attractions in New York, Vermont, Michigan, Minnesota, Washington, and Maine that built capacity around Canadian visitor spending are absorbing revenue losses their own elected representatives are now raising in Washington. The Manitoba Chambers of Commerce added the business community dimension to the escalation, describing the new tariff measures as moving in the wrong direction. Business groups on the Canadian side have consistently emphasized that tariff escalation creates planning uncertainty, raises input costs, and makes capital investment decisions difficult for companies operating on both sides of the border. That position, coming from a provincial chamber of commerce rather than a government, reflects the commercial constituency that would benefit most from a negotiated resolution and that has the least ability to influence political dynamics driving the escalation. The U.S. Trade Representative's National Trade Estimate Report has formally listed Canada's Provincial Liquor Board restrictions as trade irritants requiring resolution. USTR Jameson Greer identified the alcohol restrictions as one of the conditions Canada must address for CUSMA to be extended. Ontario's Finance Ministry has stated that American alcohol remains off LCBO shelves until American tariffs are completely removed. Those two positions are structurally incompatible as currently framed. Washington wants the bans lifted before or during negotiations. Canadian provinces have tied removal to the end result of those negotiations. California Senator Adam Schiff wrote directly to Quebec Premier Christine Frechette requesting the province reopen its market to American wine, describing the boycott's effect on California winemakers, and noting that Quebec alone represents a $434 million market currently closed to American producers. Frechette's response was documented and direct. The measure remains in effect as long as the United States maintains its tariffs. And Quebec will reevaluate its position when the American administration reverses those measures. Representative Claudia Tenney announced she will introduce the Combating Attacks on Our National Alcoholic Drinks by Allies Act legislation that would initiate a Section 301 investigation into Canada's treatment of American wineries, breweries, and distilleries under the Trade Act of 1974. Section 301 is the same legal authority used to launch the investigation of Chinese trade practices that produced the original China tariffs. A Section 301 finding can authorize retaliatory tariffs specifically targeting the offending country's exports, meaning the alcohol dispute has escalated from a bilateral commercial irritant into a subject of proposed American trade legislation. The 30-day implementation window on the July 20th tariffs runs to approximately August 19th. Canada's premiers have confirmed the alcohol restrictions remain in place throughout that period. The consumer behavior shift. The restrictions produce Canadian drinkers switching to domestic products and, in documented cases, preferring them is the component of this dispute that does not automatically reverse when the political conditions change. Shelf space that Canadian producers captured during the boycott is shelf space American brands must now compete to reclaim.